Good evening. My name is Christopher Ram, and welcome to this special edition of Plain Talk. Over the next several weeks, we'll be having and hosting every Wednesday evening at this time an edition of Plain Talk, which will be rebroadcast on Sunday evenings at 5 p.m. on Channel 7. Now, the focus of this program is on elections 2015, and as you know, those elections will be held on May 11th. So when this week began, we had 3 weeks before what is probably the most important elections this country has had to face for several decades. For me, this week has been characterized by a number of developments. I think the organizational skills of the women who organized the APNU plus AFC Women's Rally. Vanessa Kissoon taking on the race baiter-in-chief Barrett Jagdeo, and Sharlina Najir taking on the vulgarity and behaving as a woman ought to do, with dignity, in the face of his vulgar assault on her outside of the Wim Magistrates Court. Earlier today, Wednesday as well, we saw Kim Kissoon and Howard Bulkan flooring PPP presidential candidate Donald Ramatar with questions that even a junior minister ought to be able to answer with facility. Of course, this week also saw Barrett Jagdeo, former president, refusing to face the court and to face a criminal charge that was brought by a citizen for his race baiting talk and accusing African Guyanese of getting up on election day and beating drums in the villages and saying, we got to throw them coolie people. Well, perhaps it wasn't too surprising that Mr. Jagdeo did not turn up to face the courts. He brought an action against Freddie Kissoon, a libel action, and he refused to face the courts as well. So maybe nothing is too surprising. Now, this evening's program is in two segments. The first segment is with Dr. Surendra Persaud, a practicing surgeon, and we'll be talking for approximately 25 minutes on medical issues, the state of medical services in Guyana. And then in the second part of the program, we will have Mr. Robert Badal, who is a chartered accountant by training, a hotelier by profession, and Mr. Fred Collins, former director of Transparency Institute, Guyana, appearing to talk about business and corruption without any suggestion that the two are necessarily related. Dr. Surendra, welcome to Plain Talk.
A pleasure, thank you.
You have been practicing in the medical field for several years, despite your very youthful appearance.
Thank you.
How satisfied are you with the state of the health services in Guyana?
You can't be satisfied. I don't think there's any person who will say they're satisfied. We see tremendous disparities when you look at whether you compare private sector care to public health care, there are disparities. When you look within a region in Guyana, you see disparities. When you look from one region to the other, there are disparities. As physicians, that will always bother us. We go into medicine. One of the driving forces is to help people. We don't see your income statement. We see patients. Our guiding principles are we treat everybody. And so for many of us, and I think I can say for almost all medical practitioners, we're not happy when we see this disparity.
Now, we have seen an increase in the number of hospital beds. We've seen an increase in the ratio of doctor to patients, and I think those are some of the indicators you use to measure health services. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, there are a number of things. If you look at international bodies like whether it's United Nations, PAHO, there are sort of markers which we're going to use to follow how a country is doing or how a particular hospital or region is doing. Now, in Guyana, when you look at healthcare, we're going to look at, let's say, why do we as citizens die? And we are aware of that. So if you look at what are the things that are going to be between the ages of birth and 5, why do our children die? What? And then there are various groups. So we know why we die. It's called the health situation in the country, and that is what drives policy. And then the second thing you look at is, well, what are your cancers? What are your chronic diseases? And how you manage that. And that is what determines what the health situation is in a country.
We often hear, and I go back to this issue of the number of hospitals, hospital beds, the ratio of doctors to patients, how much money we're spending.
Correct.
How much is it a question of quality, and how much is it quantity? Is it numbers that matter or quality that matter?
It is always quality. Healthcare is about the patient. We can put fancy buildings up, but if you don't have the equipment and you don't have the properly trained persons, whether it's healthcare or whether it's any other environment, it's not going to work. So in healthcare, we manage and we follow healthcare by looking at quality assurance and quality measures. So for example, if you look at the Millennium Development Goals, they will say, well, you needed to look at infant mortality, or you look at maternal mortality. You look at things like childhood obesity as a marker of how the country is doing. Now, one may say, great, we have nutrition, but if your childhood obesity rates are going up, you don't have good nutrition. And right now in Guyana, when you look at one of the statistics, you'll see childhood nutrition is going up. We come back to talking about things like maternal mortality. And as I've mentioned before, when we look at that, and again, we need the public to recognize that this was an arbitrary number. What the Millennium Development Goals said, listen, whatever is your number, we need you to decrease it by 3/4. It didn't say this is the right number. And if we honestly
in other words, you must be improving
correct
continuously.
So, but if we ask, is there a number of women that we would accept should die becoming mothers? The answer is no. All of us would agree that number is 0. So it's a relentless pursuit. And so what I've asked is, let's look at Georgetown. It's a small town. Within a few blocks of the public health system, the Georgetown Public Hospital, you've got hospitals where you don't hear about maternal mortality. Why is it a few blocks away we have that issue?
You mean from in the private sector hospitals versus the public sector hospitals?
Now,
well, you answer the question,
the
please.
immediate comment about that, well, the public hospitals are doing a lot greater volume. I agree with that. Of the 15,000 births, they would be doing 6,000 in the public hospital. But we know that. So if you know that, you plan for it. Okay? If you talk to a business person and whatever business they're running, when they budget and they say, what am I going to have next month or next year, they're going to base the size of their shelves or what they're going to order or what they're going to purchase based upon a projection. We see pictures of 2 women and 2 babies in one bed. Now, I think we'll all agree that smacks at a lack of planning.
And that's despite the fact that we keep talking about the improvement in the number of beds for patients.
Well, the challenge with just increasing beds, it's not just increasing beds, it's how you manage care. For example, if you look at developed countries, what they have done is they have changed the way we practice medicine. There were times in my training where if you were going to have an elective surgery, you would be in the hospital 2 days before your surgery because we were preparing you or we were optimizing you. And you had surgery on your intestines and the surgeon would start you on tea, water, and jello. And not until a lot of things happened would we feed you and then get you home. Well, today we bring you in the morning of your surgery. You have your surgery. Some of the surgeries we're sending you home in the afternoon.
And that's both private and public sector.
And public. But you may say that the private sector has an incentive to do it efficiently. And so what we need to do is accept that healthcare, like many other things, has to be subjected to business principles. We're not, you have got to run things with good governance. You've got to know you're providing a service, be it seeing patients, be it removing someone's appendix, be it providing high blood pressure care or diabetes care. You're providing a service. And so you've got to plan, you've got to budget, you've got to allocate, and you've got to know how many you're going to take care of.
Do you see that happening in the public sector in particular?
I've asked a fundamental question for a few years, and I'm still to get an answer. Can someone tell me what is the cost of an appendectomy in the public health system? Can someone tell me what is the cost to see a patient? Now, this is the public hospital. One would expect that information would be in the public domain. To the best of my knowledge, it is not. I have asked, how do we allocate resources?
I shouldn't be asking you as an accountant, but why is that information important? What
Because-
do you do with it?
Because I can tell you, in my practice, if I know that I am going to see so many patients a day, or I'm going to be taking care, or I project I'm going to be doing this many surgeries per week, it drives everything else. It drives how much staff I have. It drives how I plan. It drives how I utilize the theater. It plan everything, because these are the things
Efficiency measures.
Correct. And I think that applies to almost any business or organization.
But you don't see it in the public sector.
You don't see the evidence of it, because my simple question is, we've all gone in and you see lots of people. You see evidence that surgeries there's a waiting list. Now, why is that so? Now, it could be, and I think most of us agree, there are large percentages of persons who are obtaining care in the public health system just because they cannot afford, their living wage or what they're earning isn't enough for them to utilize.
But the public sector, the public sector of the medical system should cater for that reality.
Correct.
That there are so many poor people who will not be able to go and get private medical care.
The second problem is you've got Georgetown Public Hospital, and you've got persons coming from all over to do that. If you look back at the law, there's something called the Regional Health Authorities Act.
Yes, yes.
Okay. The regional
Is it in place? Is it operating?
Well, the only regional health authority that has been created is the Berbice Regional Health Authority. And even that has not been fully functional, because I believe the Regional Health Authorities Act, when the Berbice Regional Health Authority was created, it was supposed to expand to cover an area beyond what it is. And the question is, we did it, we passed the law, we started the process, why haven't? One of the challenges in Guyana is our geography. We don't have the infrastructure where you can get from here to Letem in a short period of time. So it is very important in our situation to have decentralization.
Now, you talked about, on this question, and in fact I think it's the very first question you answered, about the level of care. Is access a function of the region where one lives, or is it access to proper health care evenly distributed in this country?
No, we know it's not. We know it's not. If you look at statistics,
Can you fix that? Is that how does one fix that?
I don't think it's a question of if. It's a question you have no
You
choice.
have to
You
fix
have to. You cannot say that because you live in one place you're going to get a poorer quality of healthcare. It's one country.
Yes.
We as the health sector have a moral obligation to fix that.
And the state.
Yeah.
It has
so
to treat every taxpayer
correct.
evenly.
You cannot accept a situation where, by virtue of where you're living, puts you at just that disadvantage. I mean, that's what the regional health authorities, and that's why you have this system. Now, yes, maybe if someone just doesn't have a road, or they have to take a boat to get to you, but if you're going to do an appendectomy in Georgetown, or in Bartica, or in Linden, or in Letem, or in Berbice, your outcomes should be the same. Now, it might not be true for somebody having cardiac surgery,
Yeah.
But it comes down to...
Which is especially scary.
Correct. So what we have to say is that, listen, this package of services, we, the citizens, irrespective of location, irrespective of income bracket, whether they choose private sector or they choose public sector, you should get the same standard wherever you are. Now, over time, we can move the bar or expand what is this basic package of services. But your high blood pressure, whether you're in Georgetown or Letem or Bartica or Port Kaituma, I think we can all agree you should receive the same level of service. That doesn't require tremendous investment in equipment.
Now, with all, you hear the government, and I come back to this question of numbers, the government saying how much money it has been spending on health, it's spending on education. Yet private medical facilities seem to be mushrooming all over the place. Why is this?
Well, I think you look at private healthcare facilities, you look at private education. I come from a slightly different philosophy where healthcare is. Now, there is always a role for government in healthcare, everywhere in the world. The question is, what should that role be? Nowhere in the world is there agreement on how much government should play a role. Is it actually where government, in almost every system, government pays. The question is how much and for what? For me, what we need to start the conversation is, what are the services that every Guyanese is entitled to, irrespective of your income?
And in your view, that has not yet been defined?
I don't think we have clearly articulated. It should be a document. You should say that, listen, there is something called a package of publicly available healthcare services.
In Guyana?
In Guyana. I don't believe it's articulated out as clearly as it needs to be. When you read documents, it references it. So one of the things we need to do is we need to say this is what. So irrespective of where you are in Guyana, as a citizen, you should expect that if you go into a health facility, private or public, this is available to you. Now remember, in Guyana, we have a single law that covers every health facility, be it private or public. Prior to that law, we had two different standards. But now we have a singular law. It's called the Health Facilities Act. So whether you're private or public, you're playing by the same rules, which is great. So all we have to do is to agree that a citizen should have these services. And then we need to say, these are the facilities that you can get that portion of the services. So if in a region you have to have these services available, well, where do citizens go? We hear stories of a person's going to hospital A, and this hospital wasn't doing that, or this diagnostic center wasn't doing that. And then have to move from this hospital to that hospital. And then eventually I have to end up at a Georgetown hospital. Well, that's not the best way we should do that.
Because patient care should be planned.
The patient should know that if I go to this health facility,
this is what I get.
They can do that. They're going to have an x-ray, or they're not going to have an x-ray. They're going to be able to do the blood test, or they're not going to be able to do the blood test. I can have my delivery here, or I can't have my delivery here. That should be public information.
Recently, Dr. Persaud, there was the revelation that hundreds of millions of dollars had been spent on medical and cosmetology benefits for leading government persons, much of it outside of Guyana. What was your reaction as a medical person and as a citizen when you heard that?
Well, the first question you ask is, what was this money allocated for? And I believe if you look in the budget, this money is generally allocated by Parliament for those persons, those citizens of ours who need care that they cannot afford, that may require. I have asked the question. We all read in the newspapers where somebody is pleading for help for their child to have this or to have that. I've asked the question, where is the policy on who you apply for to get this money? What is the criteria by which it is determined who? We clearly will not be able to give everybody the money. But if this
It can be equitable, however.
How-
it must be and
there must be
transparent.
transparent. So you've got to have a system that says, listen, if the doctor says this child needs brain surgery, there must be a criteria by which somebody goes through and says, yes, this child can benefit. And if you're having that procedure, well, that may not be a life-saving procedure, so we can't really fund that right now, but these life-saving procedures. Or can this be done in Guyana? That's what managed healthcare is about.
Now, you said you asked those questions. Was it rhetorical, or you asked the persons?
No, I've asked in general because I've looked.
Did you get answers?
The answer is there isn't one. There isn't a document in the public arena that says, here is who you apply to, and here are the criteria. I have not found it, and I haven't had anybody say to me.
You're
here.
on the APNU plus AFC list, is that correct? sir?
Correct.
What would you do with something like that kind of medical assistance program? Let's
Well,
give it a name.
The first thing is it has to be transparent. What is the money being allocated for? So, as you mentioned, there were a number of persons in the government who got this assistance. The first question is, monies should be allocated for citizens, John public citizens who cannot afford. Now, if we are going to provide health care for the government and all branches of the government, how do we do that? Now, one thing, for example, and this is my personal opinion, one thing, for example, you may say that every person who is part of the government subscribes to a government-funded insurance. So you call up an insurance company, you ask them to provide you with quotes on what it would take to provide the entire government. So all the judiciary, the parliament, all branches of the government. Now, once you do that, you're buying into a managed healthcare program. The government funds, pays for it, and then you have equitable distribution. And then you have a separate fund that is for the persons, those of our citizens, who need services that cannot be are not available in Ghana. And then you have some criteria and a transparent one where this can be addressed.
So you would be advocating such a system if the APNU plus AFC were to get the government?
Absolutely. You would have to have some modicum of transparency and criteria.
The government drug procurement system and its Jagdeo, former President Jagdeo and his friend, admitted friend Bobby Ramroop. Would you advocate a change in that drug procurement policy that appears to favor a particular person?
I think anytime you're sourcing anything from one person, that does not help competition, it doesn't help efficiency. And so, we've talked about the Procurement Commission. We've talked about regional health authorities. If you decentralize the healthcare system into regional authorities, then each regional authority is then responsible for its procurement. And you follow.
Wouldn't that add the cost?
No, we may save.
If you have to, you might lose the benefit of bulk purchase.
It's most likely large enough within
each region
that you would not lose. And recently, Dr. Norton spoke about the number of expired medications that had to be destroyed.
240 million, yes.
Now, the question is, if and we've read of places which are running out of medications. So I think if you ask an average businessman, would he want to run, if he had stores in every region, would he run his entire central bond in Georgetown? I think he would say no to you.
I have two final questions for you, Doctor. Did you support the specialty hospital? We know the opposition has been blamed for saying no to the specialty hospital. If you didn't and you don't support it, why not?
But here is something that I've heard statements made about the specialty hospital that need to be clarified. Is the specialty hospital, or was the concept of the specialty hospital, a medical tourism hospital? If the purpose of building the specialty hospital was a medical tourism facility, I think we'd all agree that that's not a first priority, because governments should not get into building medical tourism facilities. If, on the second hand, you were saying that this hospital is to provide specialized services to John Public, my question to you is, we've got the Georgetown Public Hospital that already has a structure. We have physicians there who are not who we don't have the equipment there to utilize all of their capacity. So let's fix public hospital. We don't need another specialty hospital. We've got the Georgetown Public Hospital. You've got a physical building there. We've got physicians who have got skills that are being underutilized. So let's fix the Georgetown Hospital. When you have maxed out the capacity of that facility, then let's look at what other public facilities we need. So to that question, I'd say first, I'd like somebody to clarify. Was it a medical tourism facility? Because if that was what it was, then we certainly don't.
Again, you would not advocate as a part of an APN UFC government to pursue that dream.
I think within Georgetown, we have the Georgetown Public Hospital. We would spend the money to fix that first.
My final question to you, Dr. Persaud, is there sufficient transparency and accountability in the health services of Guyana?
I think with everything we've just said, the answer is plain no. We don't know. How could we not know what the cost of things are? How could we not know how you're budgeting? How can we not know who benefits from taxpayer funds for healthcare? So I think if you just look at that, you would have to say the system is not transparent.
Dr. Surendra Persaud, it's really been a pleasure, and I've never seen a half an hour move as quickly as the past half an hour has. And thank you again.
Thank you very much. A pleasure being here.
Okay. Viewers, we'll now take a station break whilst I arrange for my two other guests to take up their position, and we go into the second segment of this evening's Plain Talk Election Special.
Hello, can I take your order?
What would you like to have?
I think I'll have a fish. What do you want?
I think I'll have some prawns.
They will have chicken.
Okay, boss, where you going?
I'm going
Well, you go straight there, then you make a left, then you make a right, and then you go reach.
You make choices in your everyday life. Not voting lets others choose for you.
And you go right. Yeah, you make a right, and you go there.
Stop, boss. I is the boss.
Vote like a boss because you are the boss.
South Transvaal boss. I am the boss.
Okay, let's go.
I'll have the fish.
And I'll still have my prawns.
I'm a boss.
I'm a boss too.
What? Was it something I said?
On May 11th, be your own boss and vote. A message from the Guyana National Youth Council.
Monday, May 11 is Election Day. On Elections Day, all polling stations will open for voting from 6 hours and close at 18 hours or 6 p.m. If at 18 hours or 6 p.m. there are still electors in the line at any polling station waiting to vote, they will be allowed to vote no matter how long it takes. The presiding officer will count the number of persons in the line, take the name of the last person, and instruct the police officer present at the polling station to stand behind the last person in the line. Thereafter, everyone in the line will be allowed to vote. No other person who joins or seeks to join the queue after 18 hours or 6 p.m. will be allowed to vote. It is your constitutional right to vote at the upcoming general and regional elections, providing you are listed on the voters list. Vote early on Election Day. For more information, contact the GCOM on 2250-27729, 2266-557, 2239-650, or visit www.gcom.org.gy.
Hello, can I take your order?
What would you like to have?
I think I'll have a fish. What do you want?
I think I'll have some prawns.
They will have chicken.
Okay, boss, where you going?
I'm going
Well, you go straight there, then you make a left, then you make a right, and then you go reach.
You make choices in your everyday life. Not voting lets others choose for you.
And you go right. Yeah, you make a right, and you go there.
Stop, boss. I is the boss.
Vote like a boss because you are the boss.
South Rhineville boss. I am the boss.
Okay, let's go.
I'll have the fish.
And I still have my problem.
I'm a boss.
I'm a boss too.
What? Was it something I said?
On May 11th, be your own boss and vote. A message from the Ghana National Youth Council.
Monday, May 11 is Election Day. On Elections Day, all polling stations will open for voting from 6 hours and close at 18 hours or 6 p.m. If at 18 hours or 6 p.m. there are still electors in the line at any polling station waiting to vote, they will be allowed to vote no matter how long it takes. The presiding officer will count the number of persons in the line, take the name of the last person, and instruct the police officer present at the polling station to stand behind the last person in the line. Thereafter, everyone in the line will be allowed to vote. No other person who joins or seeks to join the queue after 18 hours or 6 p.m. will be allowed to vote. It is your constitutional right to vote at the upcoming general and regional elections, providing you are listed on the voters list. Vote early on Election Day. For more information, contact the GCOM on 2250-27729, 2266-557, 2239-650, or visit www.gcom.org.gy.
Welcome back to Plain Talk. As I introduce my two guests for this second segment of the program, on my immediate right is Mr. Robert Badal. As I said, he's an accountant by training. He's a hotelier in by profession now, I think. And Mr. Fred Collins, who retired, civil society commentator and activist, regular writer in the letter columns of the newspapers. Gentlemen, welcome to election special of Plain Talk.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Elections are on. The horses are off. No disrespect meant. How would you describe the tone of the campaign so far? Anyone?
Well, I think it's a very heated campaign. There are a lot of crowds. Some of the crowd have been trapped. But all over the country, you see large crowds. I think people are more mobilized, more energized, more motivated now. Of course, one party has been there for 23 years, and it gives every incentive for the population to now be energized and, in an effort to bring about some sort of change. On the one side, on the PPP side, we see a lot of aggression, we see a lot of arrogance, we see some level of racism, perhaps maybe because that party thinks that, dividing the people as it has done for many years is, one of the strategy to going back in power. On the other side, we see PNU, AFC, Unity Party, are much more sober, much more issue-based, much more towards unity and reconciliation. And I think the two are very active now all over the country.
And I want to take up that point that Mr. Badal is making, which is that I don't get the sense that the coalition is capitalizing on that very great benefit to the Guyanese people, which is watching both races working together.
In the coalition?
In the coalition. Politically working together. There's visible manifestation of both races. Given our history, I would like to see them. Don't ask me, I'm not a PR specialist. But apart from the obvious, I think there have to be ways in making this benefit come home to the Guyanese people.
More stronger.
And stronger. And especially in the context of the agents that we are seeing we are hearing about going around the place, and the agents provocateurs trying to create mischief. The Guyanese people need to draw upon what happened about in '63. There were villages in which both ethnic groups got together and chased them out. You see? So that we have got to prepare mentally and be smart as to the wiles of those people who want to divide us.
The person who seems the attack dog, though as I said earlier, I think he has met his match in Vanessa Kisoon and probably Sharlina Najir. The attack dog is Bar Jagdeo. Do you think it's a deliberate strategy on his part to inject racism and as a ploy to separate the races?
Well, I don't think the ruling party has a lot going for it, having been there for 23 years and so many problems every day, blackouts, low wages, corruption, crime. You know, it doesn't have a lot. I believe there's a deliberate policy because there's a section within the PPP, within the PYO, that think having somebody very strong, somebody that articulates race and these kind of things, that's part of the strategy in dividing people and reactivating the base they had prior to 2011, because they're appealing to one section of the vote to come back to the House.
But that might be good. That might be good for the party. Might be. But is it good for the country, Fred?
Well, I don't know if it's good for the party either, because as one of, I think the opposition parties used to point out, that there's only one party that has an interest in trying to build on racial fears. It has to be the party that has the majority of that it can call upon. And so it would not be in the interest of the opposition. Now, in terms of the governing party itself, I'm not convinced that they are significant amount. I'm putting myself out on a limb there, that there are significant amount of racists in the PPP. I think it is a strategy that they deploy, and they manage to fool those who are gullible. They put on their racist hat when it is time for them to do so, and they see themselves. Now, if it's going to benefit them, I think it's a worn out hat that they're putting on, and I don't think it is having the effect that it is, except for the simpletons.
Now, let's turn to the government's policy on investment and I don't know if you recall, in 1993 the government published a privatization policy framework paper, and it said it was getting out of businesses. We know that it still is in Gaisuko, it's in GPL, it has involvement in the bridge, it's very big in Nissil, it controls Nissil, it now owns a hotel, the Marriott. How has the government managed, and what capacity does it have for managing its involvement in business? Fred, you've been in the private sector yourself for many years.
Its capacity for managing business, well, I'm still trying to work that out. You know, we Christians say that by the fruits you shall know them, and when you look at the fruits of their involvement, I am not impressed.
I think, I mean, when you talk about strategy, is there a strategy? I mean, I see a strategy that is helter-skelter, go anywhere, anybody bring a business plan, once there's something for me, you know, I mean, we run with it. In the case of GP, in the case of Gaisuko, we have seen what has happened to the Gaisuko. Gaisuko was a very profitable company, straddled all across this country. For some reason, after the late 90s or early 2000s, Gaisuko just went toward having financial difficulties, despite a very, very generous support program from the EU. You know, today we're producing half what we used to produce. I mean, look at the investment they have made. Firstly, they scaled on 200 million or whatever it costs. I mean,
that's Jack Dio's recklessness.
Well, it's recklessness. It's very poor decision.
Isn't part of the problem? Sorry, Fred. I mean, you'll come out. But isn't part of the problem? These people are spending money that they don't own. Whereas, if you screw up at Pegasus Hotel, you Badal will suffer.
I might even be fired.
Isn't that part of the?
Well, surely you're spending. It is spending money that is not theirs, and it affords a leader or a pilot. The pilot in such a project a certain level of conceit that you can plan in the face of everybody getting out of an industry. You can decide that you are a genius and that you are going to spend 200 million and then you say, look, we're going to fix it.
We're going to fix it again.
And then, but in addition to that, when Vera was saying that there are signs of trouble, apparently there were the advisors who were saying that he's talking nonsense. We saw, of course, who was making sense. So if you are in business, with such a huge industry, and you are not even paying mind to somebody. Vera was not somebody who was like me. Vera was in the industry.
Yes.
He knew what he was talking about. In fact,
His entire family. He
Yes.
grew up on sugar. Yeah.
and his predictions before were tending to be spot on. So how do you ignore a man like that?
But the truth is, many people saw through the absolute ignorance of that policy pursued by Jack Dio.
But Chris, is a kind of arrogance within the ruling party that they don't have to consult with anybody. I mean, all these decisions have been made outside of Parliament. Well, Gaisuko is autonomous, and Gaisuko has its own board. But these decisions are made. Even the constitution of the board, it's not an effective board.
And we mustn't forget that Mr. Ramatar was on that board from 1992 right up to
A long time.
to 2010. Now, discrimination and victimization in and towards the business community, does that happen?
Well, you've seen it. I mean, I am here. I'm here, a vivid example of what discrimination and victimization is. And I can't recall there's any reason to really provoke that, And look at my company before. Guyana Stock Fees was denied of building permits. When the court ordered to issue the building permit, we were then denied of environmental permit. Then we won the case. And now that entity, the
So
rights
they keep frustrating you.
all the time.
Fred?
Well, I'm always a little careful about coming to conclusions where discrimination is concerned. Mr. Badal knows perfectly well what he's saying, and we all know that his example. He knows what he's talking about. The trouble with being able to establish discrimination is that you have to discount the other variables first.
Let me give you an example. We have Robert Badal here. Raman McRae has not had any government work for close to 13 years. Now, what is that? Are you going to say we just don't deserve any government work? Come on. That is victimization. It is discrimination.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, we have to move on. What do you think of government and NISIL, whose board and management include Dr. Ashley Singh and Dr. Roger Luncheon, taking money from the NIS to finance the construction of the Marriott?
Well, certainly,
NIS, a place.
Roger Luncheon is chairman of NIS,
Yes.
right? But part of his responsibility is to ensure the prudent investment of NIS money. So
But
that it
he's
generates
also
a
director
return.
of NISIL. And Ashley Singh is a chairman of NISIL and has portfolio responsibility and oversight for NIS.
You see the incestuous type of situations you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well,
But think about it. This NIS to me has a special emotional thing about us. It's the callousness, the insensitivity, taking people's pensions and put it
and
into the
medical
Marriott.
benefits. But not only that, Chris. I mean, whatever they took from NIS, it's small in relation to what they give to CLICO. Look the way they did it. One person direct the board to issue $30 million check to CLICO, knowing very well the problems of CLICO has started.
Is that this brings me to the second element I want to deal with, the level, this issue of corruption. Were those corrupt transactions, were they motivated by corrupt principles or thoughts?
How would we know that? But I would not be surprised.
And would a
given the
reasonable
track-
person taking the circumstances?
Well, given the track record, I would not be surprised. In fact, a reasonable person would probably be on a strain to say that they weren't. There are so many things that have the hallmarks of that. The stamp is there with so many other transactions that it would be hard to see that, to believe that it was not, that was not involved. Right now, you have in Trinidad a commission after Raymond. He's like an attacked dog, where the whole CLICO situation in Trinidad is unraveling. He has his own blog, and they analyze this thing. We are having no such analysis in Guyana as to how certain things got to be how they are and how they're affecting the society. And without this kind of interaction, this kind of input from the society, you really you can only suspect what is happening.
Well, given that in the case of the Marriott, that there's hardly any business principles applied, and that amount of money, when you look at the level of occupancy, somebody investing NIS money, which is poor people money, in a hotel, you have to be very prudent about that.
For getting no returns.
And getting no return. The whole financing structure itself, and it goes further to that. Somebody, after you build this hotel, somebody come in with $8 million and buy 67% of it. I mean, this is outrageous. So there's every evidence, I think, of corruption, of self-interest, of abuse of power. There's every evidence of it.
Time has passed. I think Plico collapsed in 2009, I believe.
2009 it was,
yes.
January 2009.
But, we tend to forget that Ashley Singh and Bharat Jagdeo were at the helm of responsibility for the insurance sector. And what did they do? Those two persons, in my view, and I don't know what you think, shouldn't they be made accountable for that egregious loss? We must remember, NIS still has a hole of $5.2 billion for Clico.
Well, the short answer to the question is that while I have been hearing about all the plans that we have for dishonest people in Guyana, and that the opposition will want to, we have to hold the top people who should have known better accountable, and to the extent that the facts are determined, that the opportunities provided for us to unravel what exactly happened. Those people who ought to have known better when they were dealing with, it's not just poor people's money, it's some of the poor people and the not so poor, the whole entire,
Well, you talk about how you hold people accountable. We must also bear in mind that there are records, and we must, the possibility, corrupt people destroy records as well.
Exactly.
So we need to be, now, how have institutions for preventing and prosecuting corruption served their purpose in Ghana?
Well, in my mind, that's a classic evidence that these were corrupt transactions, because the very first thing they did at the turn of the century was to remove these institutions, like the Integrity Commission, the Procurement Commission.
Well, we've never set one up.
We never set one up.
Yeah.
So, if we had Integrity Commission, I mean, ministers' wealth, former president wealth will have to be investigated. An independent commission.
Well, is our audit office, I mean, you have the wife of the Minister of Finance in the audit office. You have an incompetent, unqualified person as Auditor General.
And Tiggy's president has written copiously about that issue in terms of the fact that he's unqualified, and he's most likely not to want to rock the boat. His representations would probably be tame. And even within that context, what he revealed was pretty troubling.
It was so bad. How does corruption affect business?
Well, corruption set on level playing field. Those that toe the line and those that dance the tune are in for special favors. Those that don't ever, like you said, in your case, you never had a job from the government in so many years. You see the case in the media, when certain media houses don't get ads from the government.
Correct.
I mean, it affects
Which
all
is the
aspects.
discrimination and victimization we talk about.
Of course, okay.
It affects all aspects of business.
How does it affect people struggling to make ends meet? Does corruption affect poor people? Or is that some esoteric concept that only
it's not esoteric.
TG talks about?
It's not esoteric in the least. In fact, this is one of the problems that people working against corruption fighters have, trying to make the average person understand that he can be affected. Take, for instance, the collapse of that building in Bangladesh. That building employed 5,000 people. When you got to the bottom of it, the use as a factory had not been approved. Now
That's the garment factory.
That's the garment factory collapse.
Yes.
People died in that thing. So you might think that corruption isn't going anywhere, but that's a case where...
and corruption has a cost as well. Somebody has to get kickbacks.
It has a cost to development.
Well, apart from that, what we are seeing here, if we can believe some of what has been coming out, there was a person, a young man, trying to do his job in terms of whether it was this permit, mining permit or whatever. And apparently 2 people were set to kill him because he did not make a decision that was appropriate for them. There was a young lady who was shot. We don't up to now. We don't know why. Working in a government office, maybe she didn't make the right decision. Corruption touches the lives of people directly.
Now, Clinton Orling, who is now with the PPP, has said, "Show me the proof."
That's a trick. That's a trick. That's a trick. That's a trick statement. It's a trick statement because one of the things that one realizes as you begin to check is that countries have had to put laws in place to be able to deal with corruption and penalties for corruption. For instance, I made a note of a few here. For instance, January 2014 is when Brazil's anti-corruption law number 12846 was put into effect. This is the law that they're grabbing all the people from Petrobras. It's not that it was a crime to take money and sort it, but the laws have been sharpened in order to deal with that. Brazil was in 2014. India, both the Congress Party and the opposition Bharatiya Janata Party, both supported approval of the Lokpal effort. So you had that law passed in 2013. You had, and so on and so forth. Apparently, in order with the Convention Against Corruption, these countries have put things into place.
Of course, we've signed on to the IADB
yeah,
Convention.
but in terms of showing me the proof, I want to point out that unless you have your laws sharpened, then a man says, show me the proof.
Yes,
what level of proof is he expecting?
Well, I think the PPP, the people in government have been singing that very song for years. Show me the evidence.
Now, if this government is saying we are going on our record of corruption, victimization, discrimination, what is a victory, a vote for the PPP likely to do in the May 11th elections?
It endorses everything that they've done.
It endorses incompetence, it endorses corruption and victimization and all the things that you have talked about, and it gives them more confidence to even better,
in the same path.
even do in a stronger,
the people said that we can do it.
Of course, if given them,
they will go again.
Because one notices on the same issue, Roger Luncheon has this habit now of saying cabinet has approved it. Whatever is illegal, cabinet is cabinet now some divine body?
I wish I knew.
It's a rhetorical question. Let me have your final comments, particularly, and link it to the previous question. What, in your view, we need to be doing on May 11th, 2015, in the interests of Guyana? Don't tell me about AFC, APNU, or PPP. In the interests of Guyana, what would you want?
Well, you know, there's a personal principle. If you have an employee and he's refusing to go on leave, you have a duty to see what he's hiding under that desk. You need to send him on leave. I think our government has been at his desk for a long time. We are the employers. We need to send the PPP on leave for a short while. They're trying to make out like if they're going to be there outside there forever, but I don't think so. We need to help the good members of the PPP clean up their party, send them on leave, clean up the party so they can come again.
I share the same belief that, come May 11th, if we have a change, then we gotta ensure that we put the systems in place that, all these aggression and all these victimization, all the abuse of power must not continue. All the corruption that the democratic institutions are in place. Like in Trinidad, ministers are being fired. So many ministers have been fired. In China, there have been more than 100,000 investigations. A lot of people have been jailed and fired. Just the other day, a Mexican head of department was fired when his son put up a Facebook of his new car. Immediately he was fired.
In any of those countries, Anil Nandalal would have gone.
Oh, long
Berry
time ago.
Ramsaran would have gone.
Long time.
ago.
But
Long
it's
time
part
ago.
of the culture. On Plain Talk this evening, we were discussing with Mr. Robert Badal and Fred Collins and Dr. Surendra Persaud the business corruption and the medical state of our country. I want to thank you, viewers, for sharing this past hour with me. I hope I haven't misused your time. I look forward to seeing you again, same time next week. But the program will also be rebroadcast on Channel 7, WRHM, at 5 o'clock on Sunday evening. All that is left for me to do now is to thank the hardworking operators and camera persons, and to thank my guests, and to thank everyone, and wish them a very good night.